Hello?
Chairperson, we can start.
Hello?
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, honorable members, for coming to this meeting of the Portfolio Committee on Provincial Treasury with the Department of Provincial Treasury in the Limpopo Provincial Government. Greetings to you, Honorable MEC, Tabarosquati, and your team, HOD Brad, your team from Provincial Treasury. Are there any apologies from our side, Ma'am Manamela?
We are still having that apology of Honorable Maharaj, Chairperson, who is off sick.
I see. No, that's fine. And most of the members are here.
Yes, Chairperson.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, honorable members, for coming to the meeting. Mrs. Kwati, we hand over to you for the introductions of your team, and then we will proceed with the meeting. Honorable Mrs. Kwati and HOD Brad, you are welcomed to the meeting of the Department of Provincial Treasury with the Portfolio Committee on Provincial Treasury. The meeting is officially opened. You are all welcomed. Honorable Mrs. Kwati and HOD Brad, can we get who is on your side before we proceed with the meeting?
Good morning, Chair, and thanks very much. I think MEC is having some connectivity challenges, so if I may then just introduce. I see he's in, but it doesn't look like he's audible. Chair, I've got today with me basically the executive team in the Provincial Treasury that will be assisting to answer questions if they need be. I've got Mr. Harry Petrie, the Chief Audit Executive, Ms. Florence Mabunda, the Acting Deputy Director General for Assets, Liabilities and Supply Chain, Ms. Betty Rekubu, the Chief Director for Supply Chain transversely. Then I've also got Ms. Leila Ibrahim, the DDG responsible for Program 1 or Administration or Corporate Management Services as we call it. The CFO, Mr. Mawela, is also in the meeting, the DDG for Program 2 or Sustainable Resources, Mr. Dedi Bukunsi, and then Mr. Mahoro Tema, the Chief Director, Accounting Services. Chair, I'm just trying to check who else is here, if you don't mind. Then I've also got the MEC's office, Ms. Kharesi in the MEC's office. Ms. Portia Semenya, the new Accountant General in the province. Mr. Zungu, who's the Acting Chief Director Budgets. And then obviously our MEC and Mr. Cyril Sabanda, the Director in my office. And Mr. Stephen Machavele, the Director responsible for Performance Matters and Reporting. And Mr. Kukumur, the Director Risk Management, and Ms. Ramonsi, the Chief Director Information Management in the office. Chair, I think I've got everyone. If I have missed someone, I apologize.
My apology, Chair. My gadget is going haywire. I'm trying to fix it.
Thanks, Honorable Ms. Kwati. We hope that you will be able to fix the gadget there as we proceed, so that we're able to interact well using the modern technology that we're using nowadays, the fourth industrial revolution as a consequence of the COVID-19. But thank you very much, everyone, for being here. All honorable members that are here, and MEC Squati, HOD Brad, and the team from Provincial Treasury. This is a meeting where the Portfolio Committee on Provincial Treasury interacts with the Department of Provincial Treasury as part of our oversight work to check progress of the work being done and what are the challenges, and to be briefed on any of the challenges and progress that is being made in the work that the department is doing. And because the department covers also the entire provincial government, because of its work in terms of the Public Finance Management Act, we will touch on things that affect the entirety of the provincial government in relation to finances and talk about them. And so thanks very much for coming. You are welcome. We go directly to the next item, which is a briefing by you, the department there. And usually we allow you to do the entire briefing. If we have any comments and questions and points, we allow honorable members to take them down, note them down. When you are done, we now go into that point where we allow members to raise questions, comments, any points that they want to raise with the department. So I hand over to you, MEC, Honorable MEC Sabrasquati and the HOD Brad, to make the 3 presentations: progress report on the investigative report, report on quarter 4 for 2020-2021, and report on quarter 1 for 2021-2022 financial year. I hand over to you, Honorable MEC and HOD.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and let me take this opportunity to appreciate the opportunity that we are given as a Provincial Treasury to come and interact with the Portfolio Committee. Let me also recognize Chairperson Date Kholane Phala, members of the Portfolio Committee, and their support staff. We are indeed, Chairperson, working under very difficult conditions, as you have already alluded to. And some of the areas we are actually struggling to actually be able to find ourselves really meeting some of the expectations. However, Chair, that does not necessarily mean that that should be an excuse for us not to be able to deal with some of the issues that we are expected to be dealing with, and would not have any reason whatsoever because of the ICT that we are actually utilizing. We are trying by all means to make sure that we are able to do and to be able to reach some of the objectives or achieve some of the objectives that we have actually set for ourselves. And I'm going to then hand over to HOD to take us through. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, if I may request that I do the 4th quarter first and then the 1st quarter, which includes the forensics, if that's acceptable to the Chair and the committee.
That's fine. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Chair. In terms of the 4th quarter, we didn't receive any questions, but we were just asked just to basically update the committee on our performance, which I'll try and do briefly. The report was shared with the committee members. In terms of Program 1, or maybe let me just start to say that we achieved all our targets in the 4th quarter. We had 26, all of them were achieved in all our programs. For Program 1, some of the noticeable achievements was paying all our suppliers within 30 days, and also our quarterly financial statements that were submitted for review. Chair, I won't go use the presentation, it's just giving some background. If I may just talk to the actual report. Then in program 2, we also managed to table the one budget document, obviously our annual budget that needed to be tabled, and we also had tabled all our 3 OIM reports to National Treasury, and obviously also submitted to yourselves monthly OIM reports. We also did 27 infrastructure reporting model assessments and communicated our findings to our departments, and we'll talk a bit more to that when we talk to the expenditure in terms of the year and the first quarter. In terms of program 3, we did all the cash management assessments in our 17 institutions and communicated those to them, including asset management, supply chain, and strategic procurement. And we'll also talk to some of the detailed findings in our detailed report for the first quarter. Program 4, we overachieved on our training. We tried to do additional training, noting that the risk of the second wave. So we did 42 training courses, and we also held 15 audit committee members to support all our departments. And our financial statements were also assessed for departments to just check whether they were in line and ready for the final submission of the annual financial statements to the AG, while this was still the fourth quarter reports that we assessed. Then we did the provincial risk profile. We reviewed that and looked at the mitigations and our achievements against that. We also assessed compliance by our provincial departments on the provincial risk management framework and gave reports around that. And then we also looked at all our financial systems and the utilization of that and any challenges that there were. And then we also implemented the RFID, that's the asset management system in the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, in 127 municipalities. And I'm pleased to say, Chair, that I think we haven't got the final report, but I think sports is again unqualified. So I think library books are now something of the past, and we just need to keep our finger on that pulse. In program 5, which is internal audit, we then prepared all the internal audit plans for the new financial year, and they were approved by the audit committee in the fourth quarter. And they achieved 101% of the internal audits against their target of 97%, basically catching up from the third quarter, the audits that weren't completed. And they did one quality assurance improvement program was prepared. So, Chair, those are really some of the achievements, just in terms of maybe somewhere where we overachieved. We did in the municipality or municipal finance section, we did 2 municipal governance structures that were not planned for the quarter, but that was to close the gap from the third quarter, just for your information. And then in program 4 on the financial governance, as I said, we did additional 17 courses to close the gap from the previous quarter and also to try and prevent issues due to COVID. And in the audit committee, we had additional 3 meetings to try and make sure that we're ready for the audits come May. And then in the systems, we did have additional resources, as I said, to assist with the RFID in the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture to ensure that they're ready for the audit come end of May. And then in the shared internal audit service, we did overachieve, but basically caught up from the last quarter. So we overachieved by 4%. Chair, I think I'll pause there. Our risk assessment reports also attached. Basically, our risks are being mitigated. I think one of the big risks that is certainly still there is COE, and obviously the massive budget cuts that all provinces were then handed down. And we'll talk a bit in detail to that as we talk to the first quarter report. So I can just report that we have submitted our financial statements for AG's audit. We're still awaiting the actual report. but indications are that it's clean again. We're happy with that. We'll wait for the final report. For the end of the year, which includes just on 96% of our budget, some underspending on our CRE and goods and services and capital, where you'll see in the first quarter of this year, we actually overspent as those issues only arrived or delivered subsequent to year end. And then also we underspent on transfers and payments, and that was early retirement payments where we offered early retirement and had to pay penalties. But some colleagues' pensions and leave gratuities were only paid in the current year, and that will also reflect in our expenditure for this quarter. If I may then move to the actual report, Chair, which will then deal with the forensics and the questions that were asked. I'm not sure if Martina will flag it or if I should. The actual report. Let me flag it, Chair. Okay. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Martina. Thanks, Chair. In terms of the forensic reports, specifically the VBS matter, we did submit a report in April and in May. To date, we've not yet received the updates. We're planning to have updates for the end of the second quarter, and letters have been sent for departments, or let me say the municipalities in this case, to update us. But we have included the actual report submitted on the 9th of April, and also the updated reports that we have. Just in terms of all the municipalities for Vembe, the status is still the same, but the case has been now opened from SAPS, and the case number is as listed there. Collins Chibani, also the same, case number is now opened. Mokadu, the case number is opened and is with the Hawks. Greater Giani, the same now, case number has been opened. Lepele and Kumpi, we did not receive a report from the mayor's office there. Polokwane, again, they did just give warning letters as in the 9th of April report, but the case number has been opened there to investigate further if there were anything behind the scenes. Ifra Mukhali, the municipality did institute civil action against the MM and CFO, and the matter is still at the pleading stage. Ilyas Mutsaledi, the 48,000, we can confirm that that's been recovered now, Chair, by the municipality. At that time, it was still a negotiated settlement, but she then did pay in the 48,000, the interest that the municipality lost. Fetahomo Tubatsi, Municipal Council resolved to lay criminal charges against implicated officials, and we've also got the case number at the bottom there with the Burgersfort Police Station. Capricorn, we can share, Chair, that report has now been shared with the municipality, and the acting CFO has been charged, and also a case number has been opened there by the Hawks. Tulumela Municipality, we can also report now that report was shared with the municipality by Coxter, and the case has been opened there. On the next page, B is just all the municipalities with their case numbers, just for reference purposes, Chair. If I can then move to the debt management question around progress in our debt collection. Chair, we are not doing well as a province. We're only collecting on average about 7% our collection rate. And that's basically calculated adding the balance brought forward plus the new debts and dividing the recoveries by that 441 million. And we're only collecting around 7%. And you'll see there that most departments are collecting very low, less than 5%, and we'll talk to that in the detailed report on the debt issues. We can report that National Treasury has now appointed a panel of debt collectors. As you know, we're meant to use the state attorney, but National Treasury has given exemption and appointed a panel of debt collectors transversely for the country. And we as a province have agreed to partake, and we encouraged all our departments to partake in that transversal tender. At the end of the first quarter, not all our departments managed to secure participation. As you know, we need to engage with the national to get permission to partake. And we also then found that one key challenge was that some departments don't have accurate debt registers, which are supported by the relevant documents to enable the recovery process. So departments are now trying to reconcile and get all the supporting documents in place to be able then to hand over those cases to the appointed debt collectors. And we will make follow-ups to show that that happens. The table below just gives a status then. Those awaiting approval from National Treasury, those that are still reconciling their debt books, those that have not yet started, which is Audit, and those that are participating, which is ourselves and Public Works, just waiting approval from the accounting officer. So we trust that through this process, and we have seen some improvement in the health also, that our debts will now be recovered more expeditiously, in that the state attorneys don't really give us the service that we need. If we can then look at the expenditure, I've included expenditure as at the 31st of March and then also for the first quarter, just for the information of the committee. Our provincial expenditure at the end of 31 March 2021, this is pre-audit, so before any adjustments that were made. We spent 96.7% of our audit, of our budget, and a reported underspending of just over 2.376 billion. The highest underspending was in the Department of Education at 816 million, Department of Health 567 million, and Public Works and Infrastructure at 589 million. In terms of economic classifications, the largest underspending was on compensation of employees, 955 million, mainly in the Department of Health at 692 million, and Education at 140 million. The high underspending in health was linked to the COVID-19 allocation that we gave to the department on a 2% surge basis. And ultimately, this money was not needed or used as the containment of the virus was done, and did not need that spending on additional CIE for quarantine sites, etc. So that money was not spent, and let's call it a saving then if we need to. The underspending on goods and services was large in the Department of Education again at 387 million, and Public Works at 102 million. With health overspending by 138 million due to the COVID-19 issues, goods and services, etc. The underspending in transfer payments was largely attributable to Education at 243 million and Public Works at around 474 million, mainly on the road maintenance grant, which we'll also touch on just a bit later. The underspending of 2.376 billion is split between equal share and conditional grants. Equal share at 1.048 billion and conditional grants at 1.328 billion. And the province has managed to secure rollovers for 620 million of that conditional grant underspending. So again, our large underspenders there was certainly Public Works in the road maintenance grant and Education in their grant. Others did have some underspending, but not to that extent. In terms of the expending for the first quarter to the end of June, we spent 16.7 billion or 24.3% of our 68.8 billion budget. And we're projecting to overspend 3.4 billion, Chair. The big pressure point here is, as you'd see on CIE, 2.5 billion. And this was the massive cut that we faced as a province when the CIE cut was done at a national level, and also the fiscal consolidation cut. And we also then further cut, as you know, the 3 billion, of which 1 billion was left in health, but 2 billion was left in the reserve for possible COVID interventions that may be needed. At this stage, it looks like that 2 billion may be available, through the adjustment budget, but we'll wait and see in the next 2 months how we do with the third wave. And now the talk of the fourth wave is the other uncertainty that we just need to also bear in mind. So we've certainly got a pressure on CIE in education is basically the big pressure point. We are working with the Department of Education. And let me be frank that this is not a Limpopo specific issue. It's across the country. Most of our education departments are facing massive budget pressures on their CIE, basically because about 80% of their budget is CIE, and that budget cut, really the only place you could find the money was in CIE. So National Treasury and the National Department of Education are also looking at this, and we hope that through the adjustment budget we will be able to relieve that pressure. But I can give the committee comfort that as a province we will be able to cushion this, provided the COVID-19 money is not required for COVID-19. But the challenge is going forward into the next financial year, the same pressure should be there, and that's the process we need to manage now as we start the budget process for 22-23. But if you look at the straight line spending in CIE, we're on 25%, so we're basically fine. It looks like the over projection is maybe a bit overestimated. But from our own assessment, we assess it to be about 1.5 billion that would probably realize once all the pay progressions and all the other issues are paid. Also, just to share with the committee now, the agreed settlement for the CIE for this year, or the cost of living increase of the, let's call it the 1,000 Rand and the 1.5%. That was not included in our budgets, as we were told not to budget for any increase on CIE. At this stage, we as a province are of the view, or been told, that we might need to reprioritize to fund that. But National Treasury is also just seeing if they can assist all our provinces with that particular negotiated settlement. The other risk area is obviously the one that's at the Constitutional Court now, the previous year's wage freeze that didn't get paid. And if that goes in favor of Labour, we'll certainly have massive problems across all provinces, I believe, but we will be part of that problem. So it is a big risk, and we'll wait to see the outcome of that Constitutional Court decision, which has been reserved for now. On goods and services, we're at 19.7%, a bit below the straight line of 25%, but again, you'll see a projected overspend of about 800,000, largely driven by the Department of Health due to the need to spend on COVID, and obviously needing money for the other normal medical issues. But we see this year, and we are monitoring that with health, the same as last year, where they projected a similar figure, and ultimately that did not materialize. So it's really just something for us to monitor through the adjustment budget and take clear decisions there. In transfers and subsidies, we're at 30%, which is above the straight line, and also a projection of overspending there of 132 million. Just to share with the committee that the 30%, we are comfortable with that, in that education has paid their first tranche, which is 50% of their norms and standards. And also sports, arts and culture has paid their sporting academies their fees up front. So at this stage, we're not too concerned with that, can I say, high percentage spend, as it is accounted for. On capital payments, still low at 13.3% of our budget, and we'll talk to the infrastructure spend now. We are seeing some pickup there now towards the second quarter. So the next couple of slides is basically what I've discussed. I won't talk to them. It's the narrative to what I've spoken about. If I may move to the conditional grant slide, just to share Thanks. Just to share here that, again, our conditional grants are not moving as we'd really like to see. At the end of the first quarter, we're only around 17.5% of our spending about 1.8 billion of the 10.5 billion. The highest spending was in education of 21.8%, which I think is commendable, and health at 18.1%, and leaded, which is a very small amount, just the EPWP, sorry, at 23%, but only about a 2 million rand budget there. We are monitoring these spendings, Chair, for each grant, and we do have a separate meeting with all our departments on their conditional grants to identify any blockages and any challenges that they may face to make sure that we do spend. But it does appear that we continuously underspend on our conditional grants, as reported earlier, the 1.2 billion that was underspent. And we really need to focus on this as we move forward. On our provincial owned revenue, some good news here is that we've over-collected against our projection for the first quarter of 196 million. We collected 279 million, which was 83 million more than we planned to collect for the first quarter. The over-collection was mainly due to the motor vehicle licenses, as you know. Some of those were not paid in the previous financial year, and that money is coming through now. And also the patient fees in the Department of Health, and I think also the debts, as I said earlier, we're starting to see those recoveries taking place much more better using the debt firms that have been appointed. We can also just share that our collection rate was more than what we collected the same period last year. On infrastructure, we have some success now, Chair. We're certainly working very hard on the pre-planning processes, and we'll see that our expenditure, while it's only at 18% now, it's a bit below the straight line. But in terms of what we see in the pipeline, we do see some improvement, and we are trying to focus on getting projects out of the planning and feasibility stage into construction phase. And as you'll see, we moved up from 12% last year to 18% this year. And in terms of our, can I say, not our projections or straight line projections, but the projections in the infrastructure reporting model, we were meant to be at 21%. So we're just slightly behind where we planned in terms of our infrastructure plans, but also then behind the straight line projection. So we certainly seen that improvement, and we'll keep monitoring that going forward. Then in terms of the investigative reports in departments, just to share, basically the status is similar to the VBS. The GAL report is still as it is. Unfortunately, the acting CEO has also passed due to COVID, so that also put a bit of a challenge there. But we are working with them to try and get that right. RAL report, Chair, we're busy finalising now. We've got the final draft, but we've got some concerns in the findings and recommendations. And we really think that this report needs to be comprehensive. The SIU is also waiting for this report to do their further investigation. So we trust that this report could be completed in maybe a week or two. The Coxter Tubatsi land issue, that is with the South African Police Services, and they're investigating. No arrests so far. Great North Transport, we can share that report now is completed and handed to the Shell and the board for implementation. We did pick up some of the pension funds that were not paid timeously, but in general, most of the money was in fact paid, but it was paid late to the administrator of the pension fund. And it has put G&T in a bit of a mess, but the report is out, and it's recommended that action be taken not only against the executive management, but also the board for failing to do their fiduciary duties when it came to the pension fund. and the trustees of the pension fund, which includes the staff from G&T. Coxter to Lane Housing, that status report is still the same, and we will wait for that also to be handed over to the law enforcement agencies. In the Department of Health, on the irregularities of the PPE procurement, we basically have gone through the report from AG and the SIU in terms of their first two reports. There were no material irregularities picked up here, but there was an issue around insufficient controls over the receipt of goods, and we're looking at that with the Department of Health. And also the storage facilities in the health depot, where medicines were delivered, or sanitizers, etc., were delivered. It was not conducive to accepting that type of equipment or medical equipment and medical medicine rather. And we're also looking at that. I know Health is also looking at trying to find a better venue for the central medical depot. So there we are on it. We are advised through the media that the SIU is now looking at some 41 transactions there, or further looking at them. And we also received a letter from Health now to do further assessments as Treasury, which we will assess and take a conclusion on whether we're not duplicating what the SIU is doing. Sports, Arts and Culture, that report is still there. Agriculture and Rural Development, status still the same. That was the laptops or the computer issues. Cases have been opened with the police for the laptops that went missing and the two that were not delivered. Economic Development, the broadband project, we have now requested all the documents from the Limpopo Connection, which we've now received, Chair, and we're busy going through the full set of documents. We've got copies of all the invoices, all the contracts, to really assess whether we need to do further forensics here. We can also confirm that a law firm was appointed by Limpopo Connection to do the same, and it was given the green light, but we still feel that as Treasury we need to do our independent review on this to make sure that the money was spent correctly and for the right issues that we gave that to them for. On the supplier payments, within 30 days, as a Treasury, we paid all our suppliers on time in the first quarter. That was 304 invoices. And then on the next page is just a breakdown as requested, how many invoices per month and the rand value. And we have included in the pack the details of each and every invoice or the payment made against each and every invoice for information of the committee as requested. In terms of the process, Chair, we certainly don't have rocket science here. We just try to implement a centralized payment system where all our invoices are delivered at one central point in the department, whether they come through mail or through the registry or hand delivered. They're then registered in a register, and those invoices are then forwarded to the accounts section, where they're then sent to the end user for final approval that in fact the service was rendered, and subsequently matched with all the procurement documents in the payment section. The director in the CFO's office then monitors the processing of all these invoices and makes constant follow-up where there's a need to ensure that payments are processed within 30 days and or resolve any disputes that may be there. So it's really a process that we've shared with our departments. Health is also trying that, noting that they're a bit more decentralized, but even in the institutions that they put the same process in place. We've seen an upturn in our payment as a province, our payment compliance, but still Health is a bit down, but it's certainly it's in the 90% now, and education also I think is at 97%. So we're certainly improving, but we are conscious of the fact that some of the information may not be completely accurate, and we're trying to look at how we can improve that in that we do get some complaints from suppliers that they're not paid, and those suppliers are not on the list when departments report to us. So we're just trying to close that gap also, Chair. In sustainable resources, I'll try and touch on this, but Mr. Pakunsi can just help if we need, Chair. Our municipalities were allocated 2.952 billion for MIG in the 2021 financial year. That's just concluded. And an amount of 2.781 billion, or 94.2% of that budget was spent, leaving unspent 171.3 million. And on the next page is a list per municipality. 9 municipalities applied for rollovers, and we assisted those municipalities through Coxta ourselves and the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agency to make submissions around that. So those are the municipalities there that did not spend all their money, 171, and we've applied for rollovers there. Then just in terms of the 21-22 financial year, we've just listed there all the municipalities' MIGS allocations that they are meant to spend now in 21-22 financial year, which amounts to just on 3.1 billion. Of those municipalities, there are 6 municipalities that make up 65% of the allocation, and those are the municipalities that received more than 100 million. And all the municipalities must spend at least 45% by the end of December, otherwise their tranches are withheld. The 6 municipalities are listed there. Those are the ones that received more than 100 million MIG allocations. Then on the next page, we've just included, obviously this is only the first month, July. They're spending for the month of July against those allocations and the money that was transferred from national to the municipalities. So we've got a budget of 3.1 billion. Nationals already transferred just over $1 billion, of which only 118 million was spent. That equates to 11.2% of the transferred funds that came in, but only 3.8% of the annual budget, which should, if we use straight line norms again, be around 8%. So certainly still slow, and we need to monitor that going forward, Chair. In terms of assets and liabilities, just in terms of what the findings were, so I won't go into each one, but we've listed the findings there and listed the institutions against which those findings were made. No contract monitoring, no market research, B points awarded through copy of sworn affidavits. They need to be original. No CSD report, no tax compliant, non-tax compliant bidders awarded in 3 departments, 3 quotation system not used in Coxta. Contracts running with outsigned SLAs in health and rail. And so the list goes on. I'll just leave it there. I think the committee members can pick that up. So then in B, we've set owned companies. We've set 60% disabled in terms of the white paper on disabled people, 7%, women 20%, youth 20%, co-ops 10%, military veterans 3%, SMME companies 65%. And rural township 5%. As a province, we spent 2.5 billion, of which we achieved the black-owned. We spent 64%. Disabled, we are really struggling. Let me just talk to all of them. The disabled, the co-ops, and the military veterans are the 3 areas that we are not doing well with. We've had meetings with the military veterans, with the deputy president, and a task team has been established through the Office of the DG to look at how we can support them better. And also we've had meetings with Officer Premier's disability team to see how we can really source quotations, etc., from disabled people. Women-owned, we've exceeded just on by 1%. Youth-owned, we're not doing well. We're 7% lower below our target. And the SMMEs, we're just 1% under at 64%. Our rural township, we think that target needs to be revised. It's set at 5 and we achieved at 20%. The next two tables are just per department. I won't go into that. The green is where they've achieved the target. The red is where they've not achieved. We have sent out letters to all our departments to really look at this and ensure that they use those pre-qualification criteria when they put out quotations and or tenders. And then also for the entities on the next page. Asset management compliance. These are the findings that we've made in assets where we have found some fictitious barcodes. The fair valuation or assets still at R0. Non-submission of reconciliations between what's in the BAS records and the asset register. Lost assets not investigated and been there for more than 2 years. Those are disclosed adequately in the financials, but we still need to actually clear them out, and if there are consequences, take consequences. Assets in the registers not allocated to users, so accountability will be a problem, and we need to ensure that that happens. Prepayment of assets in the previous financial year, but not delivered to date, but those do come eventually. It was just in transport. Non-disposing obsolete assets. Again, we found some old assets that are still lying in the register, not disposed of. But we acknowledge that during COVID now, the auctions were a bit of a challenge. And then also where we found the opening balances differ to what they put in their financial statements, and that was in the Department of Health. In terms of debt management, Chair, as I said, only at 7%, we've got our findings there. And generally, the findings are pretty much the same for most of the departments. The first is around the face value documents. That's the receipts that we need to submit the inventory levels for us to ensure that we have sufficient stock, that they don't run out of receipts when people want to pay. That's not been done. Debts are not immediately confirmed, reconciled and created as and when the department becomes aware of a debt. We see a lag between that and obviously now with the debt collection firms, we've seen this as a bigger gap in that the records are not there. Lack of dedicated debt management staff in districts. Staff debts not recovered within 30 days as most of them have made arrangements to pay in installments. And then the low recovery rate is certainly a concern in all, with health being quite high at 19% and Office of the Premier at 31%. The rest of us certainly need improvement, and hopefully through this process we will be able to improve that cash back into the system. In terms of cash management, in the public entities, we did not find any issues there at this stage, Chair. In terms of the financial training, with the 28 courses, the lists are there and when the trainings were conducted and exactly what training was provided. BAS around the general principles of BAS and financial reporting. Logos around posting, basically dealing with the supply chain and the general ledger issues. And then PERSOL, the various functions within the PERSOL system, and that was also then provided. Those are the courses that were provided and the dates on which those courses were provided. On how we ensure that the relevant officials attend, Chair, we do have a schedule of all the courses offered, and we circulate to all the CFOs and the system controllers, those that then look after the accounting systems. And we sent that out in March 21. Nominated officials completed the nomination form, which is then forwarded to the coordinator for the course. And the course coordinator then assesses the details of the nominee as per nomination form to confirm that they're relevant for this training. So we don't want a PA coming for PERSOL training unless they want to move into that, but we try and prioritize those that are working in the system and need additional training. Once the coordinator is satisfied with the nominated official's responsibilities, and they're relevant, the course is then confirmed and a letter is sent with all the details of the course to the employee to then confirm acceptance. And we did attach just a nomination form just for the committee as an extra E. In terms of the financial statements, Chair, again, it's quite detailed. I won't go into it, but we've looked at all the financial statements of all our departments. This was prior to submission to the AG around about the end of May. And we've then included here, we've basically broken it down per functional area in the financial statements and what findings we have made. It's not relevant to each one, but we've picked up the general findings that we think may be, won't say important, but may be interested by the committee. We've attached the detailed finding reports as an extra F to 12 in the pack that we've submitted. So we look at the trial balance, Chair, just to check that the prior year corresponds to what was in the previous year's financials. The revenue, we also confirm whether the revenue is as reported to us as Treasury, and that what has been paid over to us is also recorded correctly and what you've surrendered to the revenue fund, and we found some overstatements there. The appropriation statement, we really look again in terms of the IYM that we receive, whether that's green and whether the economic classification corresponds to what's in the second adjustment budget, so that the budget column is correct and some errors were found there. Statement of financial performance, generally this interfaces itself from the best trial balance, but there were some issues around the PCETA and the treatment thereof as aid assistance, and some of the net surpluses deficits were not updated. Compensation of employees, we really just looked at the average number of employees, the rest interface from BAS. Unauthorized expenditure, we then look and confirm against the legislature resolutions and whether departments have funded what they need to fund and where we've given them money in terms of scope that it's accounted for. Receivables, we do pick up differences between what's in there and the supporting documentation. Voted funds to be surrendered, that's a figure that the Provincial Revenue Fund needs to look at, and we then reconcile against the money that we've given, the expenditure that's been recorded, and what should come back to the Provincial Revenue Fund. Debts written off, we look at that, advances, receivables, and Chair, I won't go into the detail, but we look at basically each disclosure note to see whether what they put there can be substantiated and it ties up to the supporting documentation. A limitation at times is the availability of the working paper file when we do review these financials, but quite a lot of work has gone into that, Chair, and I think we're certainly starting to see the benefit that now, as you saw the clean audits last year, and we hope similarly this year, and maybe that there would be one or two increases, but we will wait and see. We are told that the legislature slipped up with one misstatement, which was a technical issue again, and lost their clean audit, but we will just see the outcomes. Hopefully those audit outcomes will be out by tomorrow, Chair, that's what I'm being told. Some have come out, it's not yet. In terms of irregular expenditure and what we condoned, just to share that these figures have also gone through the AG's audit now. And so far we haven't had any concerns from the AG's perspective. But we've condoned 15 transactions to amount of 1.8 billion, the biggest being in Coxter, the 1.6 billion, which was the housing contract. As you know, that was where they didn't use the BE points when they awarded contracts due to the price being set nationally. They then just looked at functionality and awarded to contractors on functionality. And it was agreed that you should still have used the BE points and even used the lottery system or draw the straw system to then pick your contractors at the end, those that have scored the same BE points. So we had a separate internal audit process there where they went in and looked at the whole process and confirmed what was said. And based on the internal audit report, we have condoned that expenditure. Then there were some that we felt were incorrectly classified as irregular, and they were then engaging with the AG through this year's audit, and we'll see the outcome of that now. So those have been cleared as prior errors, and that was 5 transactions, just over 1 million rand. Then, Chair, we've sent quite a few back. 24 applications have been sent back to the tune of around 76 million. And this is where departments have not met the criteria as set in the irregular expenditure framework that we need to comply with, and we'll just touch on that now. Whether consequence management was taken, let's also just confirm that we as Treasury don't take the consequences each department needs to take, and that is part of the condoning process. We need to see consequences before we can condone the expenditure. In Office of the Premier, the official was dismissed, however, he appealed and won the case, and then was given a sanction of 3 months without pay. Education, the one case was irregular expenditure, was related to the implementing agents and not anyone in the department. So at that stage, no one was action taken against any individual in the department led it. The official concerned has unfortunately passed away, but they have implemented clear protocols around that. That was relating to the security contracts where they scored incorrectly. Transport and community safety, warning letters and 1 month's salary without pay were instituted against the officials involved there in 3 cases. Sports, arts and culture, there were demotions and warning letters that were issued. Coxter, no action was taken as it was due to the nature of the transaction, and that they obviously have changed that whole process now, and it was more an interpretation issue. LTA warning letters were issued, and in some cases, some of the implicated people have left the employ of the agency. So on the next page is just really what we need to do, and in terms of the framework, there are 8 gates that need to go through before we can condone expenditure. The first is that there must be confirmation of a determination test. That's really to confirm that, in fact, there is something irregular. The next is that the findings, recommendations of the loss control function or other relevant function that conducted the determination test. So they need to confirm that there was no loss. If there's a loss, it cannot come to Treasury. It's then for department to recover or write off. As soon as there's a loss, we cannot proceed further as a Treasury. Then there must be confirmation of internal investigations that were conducted in case of any fraudulent or corrupt activities or criminal conduct. Then there must also be confirmation that the criminal charge has been laid. So if there was criminal, they need to give us the SAPS case number, otherwise we can't conclude. And also they must share with us the full report of the findings that have been made in the investigation for us to then review and take a decision. F is the one where we are failing on, and that's the confirmation that they did not incur losses and that value for money was achieved. A lot of times they just say that we didn't incur loss, and we're asking them for evidence of that. And now we've also asked for affidavits to be signed by the accounting officers to confirm that there's no loss. It's often difficult for us at the late stage to now determine whether there was a loss or not, but we really, that's F is where we get stuck and send back applications. Then G, we need confirmation that disciplinary action was taken against the responsible officials. Again, if no disciplinary action taken, we cannot condone and won't condone. And then H is that they must give us the remedial actions that are going to take place to ensure that this does not reoccur. So they need to give us the detailed control improvements for us to then look at and then finally consider condoning. So the next table is just the movement from the end of March to June. At this stage, there's 124 million basically in the Department of Education, Sports, Arts and Culture and Social Development that we looked at. But you'll see again that we've now picked up additional irregulars amounting to 143 million. So we've actually gone backwards from the beginning of April to June, moving from 12.1 billion, 1.7 billion to 12.1. We try and we've put a plan together, Chair. We've taken it to Exco. We're hoping to have all these resolved by the end of November. That's the plan. We're also dealing with the Section 100 irregularities that have taken place. We've met with National Treasury and the Department of Public Works nationally to deal with their irregular expenditure, which related to some contracts. And we also now will have a subsequent meeting with Education or DBE and the Department of Education. We did meet with National Treasury and our Department of Education, but we now need to call in the National Department and find a way forward with that. We have also engaged the AG, and it's something that we still need to take forward. In that the material irregularities, for example, in education, as you know, the 85 million that was paid for the one service provider that was stopped during the intervention, that irregularity be taken to their committee, the Material Irregularity Committee at National AG, which is an independent committee, and for them to also assess who is actually liable there. Is it our Department of Education or is it National DBE for those irregularities? So that's something that they're looking at the moment. Their processes don't do that. They look at where the irregularity happened, but we're trying to convince them to change that, to also look at intergovernmental issues when they do assess this, and we'll keep the committee updated there. The last issue is around internal audit. What were the findings? Chair, we've attached the detailed report. I won't go through it. Trust members have had a look at it. But we do look at all the findings that AG makes when we develop our internal audit plan. So the one that was approved in March, we looked at the 2019-20 audit findings and included those as risks in our internal audit plans, and also then cover those areas. We must confess that a lot of our internal audit findings ultimately become Auditor General findings and vice versa. And we are busy with what we call now a combined assurance system, where we work closely with the AG, but also keep our independence, but try and influence what needs to be audited where and what information they can rely on our internal audit team to reduce the amount of work done by AG, depending on the quality of our internal audit work. So that cooperation is certainly there, and I think that is certainly taken into account even through our audit committees. They are quite adamant that this process needs to be put in place. We have set up a team with our CIE and the AGSA team to try and facilitate this combined assurance process. It will take some time. It's a real change management issue, but I trust that will assist us in going forward. We also allocate some of our internal auditors to work with the AG to understand exactly how an AG conducts an audit and try and transfer those skills to our internal auditors to assist us to improve the quality of work that we do. But the full report is available, Chair. If you want me to go through it, I can ask the CIE, but if members are happy, I'll pause there. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks very much, HOD Brad, for that full presentation of the fourth quarter for 2020-2021, the first quarter for 2021-2022, and progress report on the investigative reports that we talked about some time ago of the various reports that we need progress on. Thanks very much, MEC's coordinator, Brad. We're going to allow all members to, if they have any questions, comments, any points, to come and make them so that you can come and respond. But I will start with those points from my side, HOD Brad and MEC Squadi. I think the first point from our side is the issue of consequence management, which we think we should talk to, because it's a point that we raise all the time. And you see it there, HOD Brad, in relation to the investigative reports, that on the area where we say action has been taken, and on recovery of the monies that were lost, generally no action has been taken except opening cases with the police in the various instances, whether it is the VPS or the other ones. So I think it's an area that we must pay attention to, so that people who do wrong things, particularly in irregular expenditure, because that's an area where a lot of wrong supply chain management things happen. Action is taken and there are consequences for the wrong actions that they take. I think it's a point that we must talk to HOD Brad and MEC Squadi. My point two from my side is in relation to GAL, Gateway Airport Authority Limited, collapse of GAL. Now that the airport has collapsed and has been for some time unable to receive planes there. I don't know what is the situation now. Is there any briefing you can give us in that regard? Partly because GAL has got a multiplier impact to the province, as you know, HOD Brad and Squadi, in 100 ways than one, including people coming to the province, including the issue of tourism, including even the business at the airport itself, the supplier businesses of hire transport, hire cars, and hotels and things of that kind. So the collapse of the airport and the fact that the airport has been unable to planes for some time because of challenges there is a big negative to the province. So just talk to that and what measures are being taken to return the airport to functionality, including MEC Squadi, whether there is anything in relation to the proposal during MEC, I think it's MEC Mukaba or Makurupecho, where there was a report that a proposal that the airport be handed over to Airport Company South Africa, so that the province doesn't spend a cent on that entity, but then the Airport Company South Africa runs it like it is doing with other smaller airports like George and a lot of other smaller airports. My point three, Dr. Brad and MEC Squad, is in relation to conditional grant spending. It's a matter that we must pay attention to. We were attending a meeting with at the National this week at the Parliament and NCOP. One of the reports that came show that we're doing very badly in Limpopo in relation to spending of conditional grants. Very bad. And I think it's a matter that I think you just brief us on what work you are doing in that regard, in ensuring that all the various categories of conditional grants that come to the province, to various departments, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that we spend them as much as possible. And I'm sure you saw there, MEC Squad and HOD Brad, in relation to the report that the HOD Brad tabled when he talked about the municipal infrastructure grant spent by municipalities. In most instances, it's 100%, and where it's not 100%, in a number of instances, it's 99.9%, which only few thousands are remaining out of the various millions. So we should be doing the same as a province in relation to the various categories of conditional grants, but it looks like we're not doing as well as we should. So what mechanisms are we putting in place in that regard to spend every cent of the conditional grants that come to the province? There is the issue of compliance to supply chain management prescripts, which is a problem, I think, in most of the departments, probably except yours, which leads to the irregular expenditures. What are we doing in that regard in relation to tightening that area, including consequence management to ensure that compliance is as much as it should be? Also, there is the issue of the compensation of employees reduction. What is the progress there? Because there was that item that we should reduce. We're spending too much on compensation of employees. We should be spending a bit more of our budget on delivering services to our people in terms of infrastructure, roads, houses, clinics, medicines, and education, and so on. But we are spending more on paying salaries and similar compensation. What is the progress in relation to that reduction of compensation of employees? Because as a province, we were amongst the highest in the Republic of South Africa in relation to our compensation of employees budget. And my next item is in relation to that the investigative reports, HOT brought that we hope that when you make follow-ups and get progress reports, there will be progress, because I see in many instances, almost everywhere, where in the column on financial recoveries, the column is there is nothing there, except in Ephraim Mogale, where they are taking action against the former municipal manager and CFO, and I think in Makulu Tamara, where they took action and someone is paying some 40-something thousand. But generally, financial recoveries are not there. And the reason why MEC Squad who are raising the issue of financial recoveries high is because we lose a lot of money on things of this kind, which never comes back to the state, number one. But also because if you look at national, they are now getting tougher on financial recoveries. You may be aware, MEC Squad, that one former minister who had irregularly instructed the department to hire bodyguards and people like those for her children at school when she was still a minister. The department has since opened a case to recover some 2 million that was spent irregularly on that irregular contract. I'm sure you are aware of that the former minister was unable to get her pensions because of the financial recovery that the department and entity at the national is taking. So it's very high. If a minister is unable to get her pensions because the department is recovering money from her 2 million from her pensions because of an irregular contract that happened in the department. What about the ordinary CFOs and supply chain officials that are involved in a lot of supply chain management things? And we should recover. That's the point we are raising, and raising sharply as much as possible from people who are responsible for this. And also in relation to the investigative reports, let's put an extra column on who are the officials responsible and what action has been taken against them. For instance, when you say GNT collapse or GAL, we don't have a column there on who actually are the officials responsible for the irregulars and what action has been taken against them. So let's have that also. But also, can we get, is it possible, HOT Brad, can we get the AGSA report on PPE in the province that has been released? And I'm sure you know, HOT Brad, our approach to this, man. You've been with us for a long time, now I'm sure it's going to us many, many years. You know, once we are spending money of the state to do a report, there is no way that a committee of parliament cannot get that report as long as state money is being spent on it. I'm sure that one you know it, but I leave it there. You know about that. Mrs. Kwati, this is to you on a lighter note. Mrs. Kwati, this advertisement and proposal that is being advertised by the Department of Health, that people who have not vaccinated must not be allowed to go into shoppings and other alcohol selling places to drink. Is it not going to impact on our revenue and other mechanisms of getting money as much as possible as a province? Mr. Mrs. Thanks very much. Honorable members, I saw the hand of, I think it was Honorable Makurupeche, if I'm right. Yeah, Honorable Makurupeche is the first one, and then we will get the other hands. Let's start with you, Honorable Makurupeche, to make your point.
Thanks very much, Chair, for the opportunity. Let me greet other honorable members, the MEC and HOD part and the team. But the fact that the chairperson has raised so many questions, I'm even a bit confused because he covered me in most of the questions he was raising. Mine, Chair, it's firstly, I'm worried with the over expenditure that is planned. They present here to say this is the planned over expenditure that is going to happen. What does it mean? And how do we plan for over expenditure? Because my understanding is when we already know, it means we need to do something to avoid the over expenditure. But secondly, RAL is consistently, and Public Works to be the department that consistently do overspending. And from the committee there, because I sit in that committee, you have an overspending, but with underperforming of targets. So I'm not able to, so I want to check whether Treasury, is it able to check this over expenditure versus performance of targets? Because if you have these departments coming to you to look for more money, when they're not achieving even their main plan targets, what does it mean? And thirdly, Chair, I want to check when the municipalities, for example, on the forensic investigations that has happened, they say we have opened a case. So what? How long does it take for a case to be known, or this case, whether is it proceeding or is not proceeding, so that we don't have case numbers that are mentioned, but without any progress, without anyone following up on those cases, whether the cases should stand here on the list, or if the NPA says there's no case, let's close it, so that we don't have a situation where 2 years down the line, because if you can check when those cases were opened, I don't think it's this year. And if it's not this year, why do they have to stand so long that the case has been opened when there's no movement on the case? Let me stop there, Chair, for now. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Honorable Makurupeche. Honorable Levia.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. A blessed morning to Team Treasury and honorable members and the support staff of the Portfolio Committee of Treasury. Honorable Chairperson, I think we have done justice with regards to points that one would want to raise, but I think it's very critical that I can also raise issues pertaining fruitless, wasteful, and unauthorized expenditure, Chairperson. Because when HOD was presenting there, and thank you very much for a comprehensive report, HOD Pratt, He said something about Section 100, the unauthorized expenditures emanating from Section 100. And Honorable Chairperson, I think it's about time we get it, if there's a way that the department can fastly and speedily process the issue of the wasteful expenditure emanating from the Section 100 era, because I think that was the fourth, if not going to the fifth administration. If there's a way of dealing with that, if they can expend it on that and it goes out quite effortlessly to make sure that the province is left with whatever is here, not emanating from previous predecessors. And Chairperson, I'm worried about the various forensic and investigative reports. When you go through that, you find out that they say, no, the official has since resigned. And Honorable Makurupecha has alluded to it very well to say there are SIPS cases. And then there are cases, there's a case that was set is 2020. That will be the trend, Chair. It will be like we are seated here on a lip service function. We talk about these issues and nothing is happening. Nothing tangible is happening because you get, there's an official who was an acting HOD or an acting MM from this particular institution. This HOD has been found wanting with regards to this particular investigations. But 3 months down the line, a year and a half, that particular official is working for another institution as well, whereas there are deeds from the past that have not been resolved. It's either Honorable Chair, Treasury, comes up with a way of saying, okay, look, this person has been charged or this person has not been charged. It's either this person is guilty or not being guilty. Because what are we setting? What are we saying? What are we saying to the public to say, Kidibone has been charged with this particular wrongdoing from this institution that has not been concluded, but today the very same person is leading another department or another institution somewhere else. Are we not making a substitution or when you repeat an offense, are we not repetitively causing problems for other institutions, not even for now, but also in the future, Chair? And I think what is also important, Chair, that Treasury, they've spoken about it, but it's very important today that they enforce the laws that are within their own confinement to say the departments must be able to pay service providers within a prescribed 30 days. Chairperson, the people that are providing services for these departments are young people. They are women mostly from previously disadvantaged communities. If it's our own departments that are not living up to the expectations of making sure that the SMMEs are growing in terms of them supporting them financially, it means also those departments are causing a serious challenge in the growth of these MMEs. And lastly, Chair, to speak on some of these cases that have been investigated, like one, I'll speak of agriculture, where they say laptops have been missing, a case have been opened. What are the repercussions thereof? They say these institutions are guarded by private security companies. What is the risk department saying there? Is those particular security companies not able, or are they not responsible to take care of the money that was lost through the loss of those particular laptops or so, Chairperson? Those, I think, are the three issues that I wanted to raise, Chair. Yes, and thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Levea. Honorable Salamalala, SD.
The Honorable Chair. Greetings to colleagues, Honorable Chair, and greetings to the Honorable, the MEC, the HOD, and the team from the Provincial Finances, or rather known as Provincial Treasuries. Chairperson, Honorable Makurupecha is right that to a great extent you captured most of the questions that would have wanted to come in. But a direct question for me to the department, you've spoken about the consequence management, and I would want them to really reflect on the consequence management at the Gateway Airport Authority Limited. The case is there. I would want to catch it there, because I think you spoke about the consequence management in general. Honorable Makurupeja will agree with me that a week ago, through the portfolio of public infrastructure, we met with the Honorable the MEC, the HOD, and the team there. The issue remaining to rates and taxes for municipalities remain a thorny issue to that particular portfolio, but also to us as honorable members in this portfolio. And when we engage at that level, the shifting of responsibility was put squarely on provincial treasuries, that it would seem there are no finances allocated to service that particular matter too. But also the second issue was that there has not been a proper reconciliation in terms of what municipalities owes and what the provincial department owes. Such a reconciliation, they are still trying to deal with it. And my question is, ever since I sat in this committee, in almost every meeting I have asked about this particular matter. And we are asking about this particular matter, Honorable Chair, on the two bases that it is our understanding that the principle of user pay is a principle that the government has put at the forefront to ensure that we have revenue generation. And if we are the custodian of such a principle, and we ourselves are not making effort to indeed represent that particular principle in our dealings, how do we then expect citizens to ensure that they pay rates and taxes when provincial government departments do not pay municipalities? And how do we then ensure that these municipalities are supported to can be viable, to can have financial capacities, if we ourselves, the primary custodians, are not able to assist them? So the department continues to say the problem is lies with the allocation of provincial treasuries. And I really want assurance, Honorable Chair, that at what point are we going to have this matter behind our back, where when we go to communities, when we engage with the municipalities in whatever forums, we do not get to hear that we have problems because the departments are not paying rates and taxes. I think we really need to arrive at that stage where we get the answers. So much so that precisely because, especially this portfolio, this department has a responsibility on municipal support. If the municipalities do not have internal capacity to resolve that particular matter, why are we not giving them support to ensure that they do the reconciliation, so that at the end of the day, they get paid what is due to them, so that when they fail to provide services, they do not point fingers anywhere? I think that's the question, Chair. That is very, very thorny for me.
Thanks very much, Honorable Salamulala SD. Those were the hands, those are the questions that members have made and comments and points. I hand over to you, Honorable MEC Squati SC and HOD Brad.
Thank you, Chairperson and members of the Portfolio Committee. I'll request HOD to go first, and I'll come later.
Thanks very much, Chair, and again, good morning to the members. I think consequence management certainly, and I think all the members have raised that, and we certainly see that as a area of concern. And I think now with this irregular expenditure framework, we need to see consequences before we can clear anything. So it's starting to inculcate that need, and I think again that if an HOD doesn't take action, the action will then be taken against the HOD. And that's also the spirit of the AG's Amendment Act, that as long as the HOD takes action against those that cause that irregularity, the HOD would possibly be then freed But if they don't, it's going to go straight back to the HOD. So it's a very difficult one for us to police, but we certainly try on that, Chair. And I think what the committees are saying is that we need to start instituting civil action, because the disciplinary process can only happen if they are still in the employ of a department. We are busy with Office of the Premier to give us a legal opinion for exactly as Honourable Labia said, that people then leave one employer and go and join somewhere else. We're also looking, and this is just ourselves, that there should be some sort of defaulters list at the DPSA level, but noting that our municipalities don't report to DPSA, it will only then help within the provincial and national government, and not even the police, etc. So that needs a much bigger discussion on how, if a person is found guilty somewhere, that he or she is then put on a list that if you appoint, you can immediately consult that list and then know that this person has been found guilty somewhere else or is in the process of some disciplinary hearing and left the employ. But I think that still needs work to happen, Chair. And I think, but what I'm hearing is that and I think we will include that in our letters now, that we want to know what civil action has been taken against those people that have left the employ and were found guilty of certain misdemeanors or misconduct. So I can't really say more than that, but as Treasury, we're trying to also check that through the regular expenditure that action is taken. If I may speak, I'm jumping around a bit, but when we come to fruitless and wasteful expenditure, that's in the ambit of an accounting officer. We don't have a role to play to condone or write off or create debts on fruitless expenditure. We certainly monitor that with unwanted expenditure, including unauthorized and irregular. But it's again, we stress to departments that they must take suitable action. And again, consequences must happen there before they can write it off. If they recover, well, then at least consequences have happened. So it's really for us just to keep monitoring that, and we're reporting now to ExCo. This thing is high on the agenda with the Premier and the ExCo. And as I say, they've approved our plan, and we'll be reporting back against that plan now in September to take progress. And I guess then we'll get a better, can I say, political push to make sure things are happening, because the Premier now is starting to hold the MECs accountable if the HODs don't do their part again. So I think that sort of chain of command is starting to work now, Chair, and we'll just have to see how best we can do it. But I agree with you fully. On the GAL issue, just to share that there is a report of the findings that were made by the Aviation Authority. I think, and I was speaking under correction, Chair, I just don't have the report in front of me, but I think there's 2 or 3 issues that they still need to deal with. As you know, we gave them the money to deal with these before they were downgraded, and that money got used for other things because of COVID, and they didn't have revenue coming in. But basically, that process is, I think it should be concluded in this month. A new board has been appointed, and I'm sure the members are aware of that. And I think it's members with aviation experience, and I trust that will also have the board really understand that we've got people from EXA, we've got people from, I forget it now, but they're from the aviation industry. They've also put together a 7-point plan, which is in 4 phases, on how they want to just make sure that GAL returns to a stable institution. For example, appointing the permanent CEO, CFO, and other critical staff, and that we're dealing with now. Looking at the cost-cutting issues and the revenue generation issues, obviously the CAA report. So they've put a plan together, which they're monitoring. At the moment, they're also asking for additional money, which we'll look at in the adjustment budget, provided we get a credible plan in terms of what they're doing and we see progress in that plan, that we don't now double fund things that we've already funded. So I think there's progress, Chair, around the EXCO decision that it should be, can I say, outsourced to EXA. That decision is still there, and the board now, we've asked them, the new board, to come back and give progress or go back to EXCO to rescind that decision if that needs to be done, but obviously backed up with motivation and reasons why, etc., for us to then, or at least EXCO to assess with all the clusters giving the input. So that decision is still an outstanding decision, and each board that came has tried to do something different. We also of the view, Chair, and I'm speaking out of turn, that maybe girls should become a 3C and not a 3D. If we look at the revenue generating possibilities now, it will never be self-funded. It has to almost 5 times its annual flights to make it self-sustainable, unless you're going to bring in other revenue streams that may make it self-sustainable. So we're just looking at that. That's obviously something that the MEC will need to assess further, MEC of Transport and Community Safety, and bring it to EXCO for decision. Until even if EXA comes in, there's no need that GAL be a 3D, because then the services will be basically outsourced. We just need a team to, can I say, monitor, manage the EXA team. So that is on discussion. We're not sure where it will go to, but if it stays at 3D, it's fine. It's just that, as you know, legislature's taken a decision for us to phase out the 3Ds from a budget allocation from the fiscus, which we are doing, and that's why GAL also got cut, and so did LEADER. And certainly LEADER, as you know, there are issues there, which we need to look at, and it will probably take them a good 4 or 5 years to exit the fiscus. Legislature said it must be done over the MTEF, so 3 years, but we'll be tracking that. We are cutting the budgets accordingly, but we just need to be cautious that we don't cut them with nothing there and then cost us even more. So we'll be looking at that. But I think in GAL we are seeing some progress, and I think critically now is going to be the appointment of a stable executive team. I can share with you that there could be a big regression in the audit outcome also, that there was just no financial management there now in terms of putting the financials together, but we'll wait for that report also. Unconditional grant spending, yes, yeah, I agree with you. We do have a separate meeting. Normally we have bilaterals where we just discuss the general expenditure. But with Mr. Pukunsi and his team, we have a separate meeting just to discuss conditional grants every quarter to make sense of what's happening, why it's stopping. But we do find that some of the reasons they give to us for not spending are not always the whole truth. You know, for example, in education, they blame COVID for not spending the HIV/AIDS grant. And we could sort of sympathize with that and say, okay, we understand that the schools were closed and maybe you didn't spend. But when you look at the other provinces, we were the worst in the country. We were around 60%, others are spending 97%. So then you ask yourself, but why did other provinces manage to spend it? And you told us it was COVID that you couldn't spend because the schools were closed. So we sort of took it from what they told us, and maybe it's a lesson learned that we need to be a bit more assertive in that the money must then be redirected. And money was redirected to COVID, to spend on sanitizers, etc. But we still are the lowest spending on HIV/AIDS, despite having that permission to spend that money on sanitizers in the schools and face masks, etc. So I think we need to also own up there and acknowledge that maybe our process were a bit, if I can say, gullible, and we need to look at that in a bit more of a serious light. The same that comes when we talk to Raul. Raul said, we're out on tender, we're going to award the tenders, we're going to get contractors in. Come December, there was nothing. Come January, there was nothing. Come February, then they started awarding contracts, but no one was on the ground by year end. And that's why Raul and Public Works have lost a substantial amount of the road maintenance grant, because we're enforcing them to use the money for maintenance and not upgrades as they have been doing in the past, which was against the DORA. So now they sat with a lot of money without contractors on the ground to do maintenance work. In the past, they would award a big contract for an upgrade and the money would be spent, but irregularly so. So now that we're monitoring their spending and making sure, and the CEO's also playing his game, that we don't spend that money on upgrades, which we're not allowed to spend, but they weren't ready to do the maintenance work in terms of the conditional grant that was given to them. So that again, we're told that they're busy, and ultimately nothing happens. So again, I think we just need to put our foot down a bit more. But if we stop the funds there again, and I think as the chair said, roads is very important for our province. Yes, we need new roads, but we also need to maintain, and I think you can agree that the maintenance has been lagging because we've been spending money on new roads and not maintaining. So conditional grant spending, we fully agree with the chair. And in infrastructure, which is a large portion of our grants, we're closely monitoring that through the Treasury Infrastructure Unit. And again, we have separate, what we call ITMC, Infrastructure Technical Management Committee, before we even go to the clusters, the technical cluster and the governance cluster, to really understand what's the issues and what the implementing agents are doing and where they're blocking and how they're stalling. And again, I think sometimes we're at the mercy of these implementing agents that promise us the world but deliver very little. And that's something that we're also starting to look at now to make sure that we don't overcommit these infrastructure implementing agents when they don't have that necessary capacity to deliver on the projects. But I think maybe MEC can talk a bit more about that. There was a special meeting in Exco just to discuss, for example, the eradication of the pit latrines and the progress going on there. On compliance with SCM, again, we fully agree, Chair, and as you see the findings that we make, it's really just people that are being, can I almost say, malicious. When the controls are overridden, it's clear what needs to be happen. We've got standard operating procedures that we've put out provincially from Treasury to say, follow step 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the checklist before you sign off a tender. Make sure these things are in place and those forms are with you as accounting officer before you sign. But it just seems that we do that work and then it gets put on a shelf. So we've now started to even review these standard operating procedures and see how easier we can make it to ensure compliance, Chair. And I think we'll continue working on that going forward. On the CIE budget, 100%, Chair, I think we've certainly come down. We were around 72% not long ago. We're at around 68% now. But unfortunately, as we cut CIE, national cuts the equal share, so your denominator gets cut, so your good work you're doing on CIE gets negated because the bottom figure gets smaller. So whatever you reduced automatically jumps up again without any fault from the province. But it happens to all provinces, and obviously the same happens to them. So we still stay with a gap that we have in terms of the national average. But we basically, Chair, we've had meetings with all our departments, and we've reviewed what we call the recruitment plans, which posts they want to fill and why they want to fill, and looked at the budget. And I can confirm that most of our departments, we've declined the requests because there is no budget to fill additional posts. The warm bodies in the system will already complete the budget that's there, and that's what we say in the 2.5 billion. We reckon it's about 1.5, and we're busy working on those figures to firm them up. But it's a reality, and it's cut from CIE, and because we as Limpopo have such a huge portion of our budget on CIE, we were hit, can I say, the biggest in terms of percentage cut, because our budget is so slanted towards CIE. So we didn't have the biggest rand value cut. That would obviously be Gauteng and the bigger provinces, KZN. But in terms of percentage cut, we were hit because we're carrying so much CIE. So we're trying to restrict the filling of posts here. We're not saying there's a moratorium, because there are certain posts that need to be filled, and that we can't turn them away. But we need to confirm that the money is there. So if certain vacancies happen during the year, we can look at that money and say you can use that to fill the X post instead of Y post that's now being vacated. But certainly there is pressure, and I think all departments are raising that, and we understand that. But the reality is we'll have to cut our cloth to fit. And it's a very difficult decision that we're going to have to take. We certainly did, or even planned for this shortfall. It was enforced on us by the budget cuts that we then implemented through your committee, through the budget process, and that's where we are now. But we're looking at that. We've taken to Exco that any surrenders on equitable share from the 2021 financial year, let's call it that billion rand that I reported on earlier, will go to fund this CIE gap. So we're not in a financial distress situation right now. If we can get that rollover or that surrender and the COVID funding, but again, we are at risk. Let me not say we're not at risk, but I think we have a plan to mitigate the overspending, and certainly we'll do it as best we can. I don't know if we'll be able to prevent all the CIE, but certainly from a payments point of view, other than CIE, we can manage, and we will manage. But CIE, PERSOL pushes the button and it gets paid. And as I say, the increases that have now been agreed to were never budgeted for. And if we need to fund that, it's just going to add even more to the pressure, and we'll wait for directive from National Treasury. But at this stage, it looks like we'll have to fund it, so it adds even more to our pressures. On investigative reports, yes, Chair, we will, and I think, as you said, we will add that civil recovery process. We want to know what's happening there, and that we get progress. We'll be issuing those letters now, so that at the end of the second quarter, we've got reports, and hopefully by middle October, we would have all these reports from all the municipalities and our departments and entities. We will add that column, as you say, in our report, and we'll also add that request for that information in our letter to the institutions. On the AGSA report on PPE, Chair, it's a national report. It's available. It's on AGSA's website. It then breaks it down per province and their findings per province. So certainly we have got that report and we can share it with you, but members are also free to access it at the National AG's website. There are two reports there, and that's the reports that we've tried to analyze in our response on the PPE finding. But again, as we say, we hear through the media that there's additional work that's happening through the SIU. On the vaccine and shebeens, yeah, we hear you, Chair. I think MEC can maybe respond to that one. Over expenditure plan, I think, as I said, it's not that we planned for it. It was enforced on us, and we need to plan to get out of that over expenditure. And fortunately, I think with us being prudent in the previous years, with your support, I think we'll manage. But certainly, it's going to be very, very tough in the next budget cycle, Chair. We'll get through this year. Next year is going to be a very, very tight fiscal period, noting this pressure that we have now. So it's about planning for this one and the next year. The outer year, at the moment, National Treasury has indicated that we can look at a 4.5% escalation or increase in our budget, which will then possibly relieve that pressure. But again, that assessment needs to be done, Chair. On rural public works, I think I touched on that. The thing that they're not spending or urge on the unauthorized expenditure now, they've overspent in one program in terms of the definition would be unauthorized. But if you look at the grant spending, they're doing very, very poorly because they didn't have contractors on the place, on the ground. And that's why we've got very poor performance in terms of the grant. So we do watch that. We also note that there's a budget pressure, as Honourable Selomolele raised around the debts to the municipalities. Public Works owes our municipalities quite a substantial amount. I think Makudu Tamaga is saying we owe them 400 million, which was a surprise to us as Treasury. But we now informed that a lot of that is tribal land and no one can really pin it down. And I agree that we need a process. This has been an old stuck record that and National Treasury is also looking at that, how best we can do it. I think the challenge comes around accountability. If you pay something that you can't vouch for, you're going to have your head chopped off on the other side again. So we need some directive at a national level to give us that exemption to say, assess what you've reasonably used, pay a reasonable amount, and then we'll see what to do with the balance. So it needs a bit more processes to be finalized at a national level. At a provincial level, we've got a committee that's chaired by Coxter, of which we partake, and with Public Works and our municipality sit there. And it is this backwards and forwards around, but prove to us that we own the land, prove to us, get your statements correct, give us the right information so that we can pay. And that's the merry-go-round that we're stuck in, and we need some clear directive to exempt us to make that payment if we can, using some reasonable basis so that we don't end up with AG saying, but that's all irregular expenditure, and then we sit back in the same situation that we're trying to get out of. Municipalities, the open cases, and what is the progress? Yes, Chair, I think, again, we will request that we will try and meet with the Major General in terms of in charge of the Hawks, Major General Josie, I think her name is, and just try and get some information. But unfortunately, it does make it difficult when we phone. They tell us that we're in progress, it's coming, it won't be long. But there is a meeting that we have with all the law enforcement agencies headed by or chaired by Major General, and we'll see if we can't get some sort of progress through that, Chair. On the fruitless and wasteful and unauthorized, it's true again, the fruitless and wasteful, as we say, we've been monitoring that. Same thing through with the irregular. And departments need to report to us quarterly, and we'll take it to EXCO. On unauthorized, we're doing pretty well. We've managed through the legislature and SCOPA to clear most of the unauthorized. In fact, we've just issued a letter to the legislature or to the secretary, where there's an amount of around 24 million, I think, that's still not been dealt with through SCOPA. That needs to be dealt with. It's a 5 million in education, a 13,000 in agriculture, and then the Public Works 1.7 million, and the new one of 16.8 million that was incurred in this financial year. So obviously, I guess those will be dealt with when we get to scope. So as a province, we're sitting with 24 million as unauthorized, and I think that's certainly a vast improvement from where we came of the 2.7 billion when we were under Section 100. So the cash flow and the budget management has certainly improved, but Public Works slipped up. They did underspend the whole vote, but they didn't manage between the programs, and that should have been dealt with through the adjustment budget to then move the funds, which they didn't do. So unfortunately, they have to account for that, and through scope and the legislature, I guess we'll get finality on those. I think there are 3 or 4 issues there. So unauthorized, certainly doing well. Unfortunately, public work slipped up in this year, and we'll see now with the final audit reports if there's any other. We're not aware of any other. The 30-day payments, yes, Chair, we fully agree that we need to get our suppliers paid, and I think we're starting to see that pick up tremendously, especially in the Department of Health. I think we've now normalized the Department of Health's budget. In the past, they were always short of funds, and that's why they didn't pay. But we've seen them move up into the 90% now. We're also looking at what's known as a lodge card, which will help pay our travel agents, that they don't have to wait for their money. They'll actually almost be paid the day they make the booking. They make the booking with a card that we have, and it's permissible in terms of our Treasury regulations nationally. And then we pay the bank back on the card. So controls obviously need to be very strong there, but it's managed just by the travel agent. There's not a number of cards out there. It's one for, I think we've got 6 or 7 travel agents that will then use it to pay for that. So we're still in the process of finalizing those negotiations with our provincial banker chair, and we will keep you updated there. But I think that will also assist. However, note now that travel has almost diminished to very little. Maybe the impact won't be as big as it was in the past, but still I think it will assist us. On the agriculture, I agree with Honourable Libia that we'll check with them whether they've recovered from the security team that's there. Those contracts are in place, and they should have. The 2 that never arrived, I guess, won't be the responsibility of the security team, but that's where they're taking action against the officials and the company involved. In terms of GAL, again, Chair, I think we have to acknowledge that there currently is no real executive management in GAL. The CEO was dismissed and has challenged the acting CEO that went in the past due to COVID. They've now put another acting CFO there, CEO from Department of Transport. CFO is vacant. We've seconded someone there for supply chain. So we are looking at that now to strengthen that team, and that's one of the key pillars that the GAL board needs for them to be able to implement any sort of recovery of GAL, and we will assist them as best we can in that process.
In our interaction with GAL, we are aware that they promised that the ultimate assessment would be done by the end of August and September. They should have been done with all the assessments that were due. However, they could not give us the exact date or month on which flights would be resuming, because that's what we wanted in terms of ascertaining that they would have done everything and use it for other important areas in the province. The issue of the vaccination and alcohol, on a lighter note, as what said Chairperson, is that I think it was just creativity. There is no policy with regard to that. So I think MEC was just trying to encourage people to make out of that creativity. But it's not really a policy, so it wouldn't definitely impact on any of the economic spin-offs that we might get in that area. So, what else that was left? Yeah, I think the HOD has already said a mouthful on most of those. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Honorable Mrs. Sukwati and the HOD Brad. I think you have responded to most of the points that we raised. We're going to allow members to do the last follow-up if they have any, just the last round, and then we will round off the meeting, because we have been sitting here from 8:30. Yeah. Just my one follow-up from my side is, you remember in relation to the investigative reports, HOD Brad, we have the Gala collapse of the previous years. Now there is this Gala collapse that happened now in this period. So I think in that report we must distinguish them. That's point one. But point two, which is more important, HOD Brad and MEC Squad, have you had any consequence management in relation to the recent collapse of the airport? Any action, any suspension, any DC, anything, man, that happened to anyone? Because the airport was not vacant. There were people there, whether they were acting or not acting, but there were people there who were the CEO, who were the CFO, who were the this and that, responsible for this and that, as management of the airport. Have you had any whiff of any consequence management of any kind? Because this is an example of what we are talking about, where a huge thing happens, a huge airport that brings economy and people to Limpopo collapses, and we are unable to get flights. The businesses at the airports have been closed, the car hires and motor vehicles and hotels and so on because of this and the economy. And now nothing, as far as I know, happens to anyone who was responsible for the collapse. So I'm just interested in whether maybe from your side, Honorable Mrs. Kwati or HOD Brad, you heard of any consequence management on anyone who was responsible for running the airport at the time and moment when it was no longer, it was declared impossible to land planes. Yeah, thanks. Let's get the second round, the final points that members want to make. I see only Honorable Slamlela want to make a follow-up. I recognize you, Honorable Slamlela.
The Honorable Chair, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Honorable Chair, and allow me to also join you in welcoming responses from both the Honorable the MEC and the head of the Department of Provincial Treasuries. Chair, my concern is that perhaps at a particular time, and I think it will just come not this time not as a question but rather a comment to say to the Honorable the MEC and the HOD that perhaps at a particular time they might need to look into how do they use their municipal support division to assist the municipalities to get out of that particular quagmire that the Honorable Squati spoke about. Honorable Squati correctly says in the municipalities, some of the things are not being verified, and some of the parcels of lands that the municipality wants to be paid on do not necessarily belong to the municipalities. And I can imagine a rural municipality in Blouberg or Molemole may not even have the sophistication and the necessary capacities. And I think that's where the provincial departments need to come in and assist in that particular regard. He correctly says claiming and paying for such may not necessarily be allowed. We agree. But at a particular point, we need to provide that particular support, because we can't be having this ball in our hands, passing it from a treasury to standing committee on treasuries, from portfolio committee on treasuries to portfolio committees on infrastructure to the Department of Infrastructure to coax a portfolio to the department and so forth. So it has been going up and down. And like I said, the Honorable Chair, we have been seized with this matter ever since we arrive in this particular portfolio is half term now. And the answers always remain almost the same. National Department is looking into this, we are looking into that. But at a particular point, we must be able to say, look, this is a strategic step we're taking. Those municipalities that were unable, which are unable to reconcile, this is how our municipal support structure in the department is going to zoom and assist them, so that once and for all, we lay close this particular matter, the Honorable, the MEC, and the HOD. Thank you very much, the Honorable the Chair.
Thanks very much, Honorable Slamlela. It was your only hand for follow-up. We're going to allow the Honorable MEC Scotty and the HOD Brad to respond. Just on a lighter note, MEC Scotty and HOD Brad, how do you always bring a team of 22 people here and only you two speak and all the others are just there listening? Thanks very much.
Dictatorship of the proletariat.
I hand over to you, HOD Brad and MEC Scotty.
The dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, Chair.
Thanks. Maybe I can start and MEC can wrap up. No, Chair, I think if permitted, next time we'll allow each one to speak to their own area. It's just that we briefed and we work as a team, so it's certainly not there. It's come out now. And we don't have that money, to be honest, Chair. We did give Public Works additional money in the adjustment budget last year, and we thought that all the areas were settled. But I think I think the figure they talking about is 900 million, which includes that Makuru figure. But certainly we're not leaving it. The meetings are happening, and we're trying to find solutions with National to deal with this. And we will continue doing that going forward. Thanks, Chair.
I thought Honorable Scott, you will have few last words as we close.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was just saying, Chair, that as we move towards closure, Chair, what we will do is to follow up on the issues in GAL, because we know that part of what we're expecting, Chair, is the implementation of the forensic report in GAL, and unfortunately some of those affected officials have already left, but we will definitely follow up and see that some of these areas that have been raised are actually taken into consideration. And once again, Chair, thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you very much. On behalf of the Portfolio Committee on Provincial Treasury in the Limpopo Provincial Legislature, we take this opportunity to thank all honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, Honorable MEC Squati for Provincial Treasury, HOD Brad, and your team for this session today. It was very interactive and very useful and informative. And on the lighter note that we raised there about people speaking, me and Slamlela and I think Makurubeja, that is a lighter note, if you understand it, because the reality is that it is the job of the MEC and the head of department as leaders of the department to represent the department wherever it must be represented, including making presentations on behalf of the department, including answering questions on behalf of the department. So there's nothing wrong, HOD Brad. It saves a lot of time, and I'm sure you see it's happening everywhere, even at national. If you watch the parliamentary channel, the HODs and the ministers, they take responsibility and answer questions, even when they have a team. The job of the team is to add where there are areas where the HOD may not be aware of some small technicality in a particular area. But if the HOD is able to go through all the issues, there's nothing wrong with that. That should be the understanding. So the team coming here, we understand them to be following up and understanding, because they're in various sections of the department, to be understanding the totality of the provincial treasury and how we are performing as the entirety of the provincial government in relation to how we are running our finances and budgets, and what are the challenges and how we are responding to them, so that even in future, when you are not there, Honorable MEC Squad and HOD Brad, some members of the team, Bosibanda and others, can get in there and be the Honorable, the MEC and the HOD for the department and run it, taking it from where you will have left. But generally, thank you very much for the meeting. A very robust and useful meeting, very informative. We look forward to the next meeting that we will hold in the coming period. Thanks very much. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks.
No, thanks very much, sir.
Thanks.
Yeah, indeed, this one of these progressive meetings we always look forward to attending.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, members of the committee. Thanks, MEC. Thanks, colleagues. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.